One of the most basic thing that programmers need to know is how to connect to a database server. It could we could be using any other language such as PHP, C Sharp, as long as we need a way for us, as long as there's a need for us to store a record, we need first and foremost to connect to a database. So for this example, what I'll be doing is I'm just going to show you how to connect to a MySQL database using PHP. Okay, so the very first thing that we need to do, of course, is we need to create our database. So I already have it here. I've already installed XAMPP on my Windows machine. So I also all you have to do is just, by the way, type localhost. Then you will be redirected to the welcome page, okay, just like what I have here. Now, on the top part of the application, there's several links, applications, FAQs, how to guides, PHP info, and phpmyadmin. Okay, so I want you guys, or let's try to click phpmyadmin so that we can actually use phpmyadmin to create a new database. Okay, so this is actually my default theme. So if you wanted to change the theme, what you can basically do is you can under appearance settings, you can change it. So let's say pamahome, pmahome. I don't know how to pronounce this one. Uh, this is actually the original theme which comes once you that comes as a selected when you first install your when you first install your XAMPP. Now there are three themes available. So original, Metro, and Pima Home. Okay, so Metro is this one. It's has a much cleaner and slicker design. So for original, this is the original theme, which is normally found on web hosting packages. Okay, so in my case, I'll just be selecting Metro since I like the cleaner and much more sleeker design. Okay, so next thing that we need to do is we need to create a database. So on the top part here, um, just try to select database. Okay, so this is actually your database. Okay, so since this will be actually a series, our goal is to create a shopping cart eventually. That's our main goal. But for the meantime, what we need to do is we just need to create a database connection. So, but before we can create a database connection, of course, we need to have a database created. So let's try to call this one shopping cart. Okay. So that's under database, and you have your create database. Now for this part, this is actually called your collation. Just try to leave it as is. Then we can click, or just try to click create. Okay. Now, on the left-hand part, this is where all of your created database can be seen. So as you've noticed, I have several databases already created. So there's this is the database that we just recently created. We have here shopping cart. Now, take note, by the way, that when you're trying to create a database, a single database is made up of one or more tables, and a single table is made up of one or more fields or columns. So let's try to create again a table since we have no tables found in database. So let's try to create a table. So for the name, let's try to call this one as let's try to assume this one as our user. Okay. Okay. You notice, by the way, that I don't normally use prefix or suffix on my table or even on my fields. Okay, so I don't normally do that. So it's up to you if you wanted to use a prefix or suffix. Like for example, if you wanted to use TBL user, you can do that. But in my case, I'm not going to use a prefix or suffix. Then let's try to use this one, number of columns. Okay, so let's try to leave it as is 4. Then let's just try to click go. Now, we are already inside our table user, as you've noticed. So we have our server. This is our server name, a server IP address or local host. Then we also have our database name, which is shopping cart. Then we're under our user table. Okay. Ideally, if you're going to create a table or a database in phpmyadmin, you try to use lowercase. Okay, so why am I saying that we need to use only lowercase? once you try to migrate it later into a Linux machine, an uppercase letter is not the same as a lowercase letter. So much better is from the start we try to use all lowercase letters. Okay, so that we won't be having any trouble, or we won't be having any issue migrating from a Windows machine to a Linux machine. Okay, that's one of the things that I've actually learned the hard way. Okay, so uh, next is, let's try to create our ID this time. So this is the first column. I would normally have it as ID. Okay. Data type is int or integer. Length values, I don't normally specify the length or the values of my ID. Default, just leave it as is. None. Collation, also don't need to touch this one. Attribute, don't need also to do anything. For index, okay, let's go to index. Let's try to use it as primary. Okay, so this one you have add index. Index name primary, index choice. Let's try to set it as primary. Then let's just try to click go. Okay, so this is already our primary key. Next thing that we need to do is we need to specify it as AI or auto increment, which means basically that every time we insert a record, a new ID is added. So it will be an incremental ID, so that we will have it as unique. We will have a unique value. Okay. Next is, let's try to create this time our admin name. So let's try to call this one as admin name. Okay. Then for the data type, let's try to specify it as varchar. Okay. Maybe you can make it as 100. Okay. Let's try the third column, so to specify it as password. Again, we'll be using varchar. Then let's try to make it as 200. That's the length. Then last is we have our last login. Okay, for last login, let's try to make it as date. Okay. Let's try to look for other fields virtually. Okay, now for last login, we try to use current timestamp. Let's try to specify current timestamp. Then once everything is set, what we can basically do is just try to click save. Okay, so we already have our user table. So this will serve as actually as our user table. This is different from our client table, which we will be adding later. Okay, this is just for user. So this actually will contain the administrator name of our application. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we are going to use this database. Okay, so with a PHP or with PHP. Okay, so I'm going to open my Notepad++. So as you've noticed, I've already opened my Notepad++. Okay, then let's try to create a connection string this time. Okay, so let's try to, okay, so link is equals to mysqli connect. Okay, let's try to, I'm going to put everything on a variable so that it will be a lot clearer. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to specify our host name. Okay, next is our username, then our password, then our database. Okay, now for our host name, we can use either localhost or 127.0.0.1, which is our IP address, which is our also will serve as our localhost. But in our case, it's trying to specify localhost. Okay. For username, usually in phpMyAdmin, the default username is root. Okay, so let's just try to type root. Then for the password, again in phpMyAdmin, which is bundled in XAMPP, it doesn't contain any password, so we can just try to leave it as is. Okay, then for the database, let's try to specify our newly created database, which is called shopping cart. Okay, so now for our MySQL Connect function, notice by the way that I'm currently using the procedural method. Okay, so let's try to specify our host name. Okay, then our username, then our password, then last we have our database. Okay, so this is, we are already currently connected. Okay, let's try to check if we have successfully connected to our database. Okay, try to open. I'm going to open it here. Localhost 8181 web projects. Okay, so it's under lessons, PHP exercises, then that's number 14. Notice that there's no error whatsoever. Everything is clean. So it means that we didn't generate an error. We have successfully connected to our shopping cart database. Okay, let me just try to show you if it's not properly connected. Now, assuming, let's say, for example, that there's an error or there's an issue on our credentials. So like, for example, we have your shopping carts. Instead of trying to type shopping cart, okay, we added the letter S in the end. Okay, so let's try to reload the page. Notice, by the way, that I generated a warning. So MySQL connect this particular error, unknown database shopping carts, which means that this shopping cart is not found on our local host. Okay, so to go back, say to erase. Next, to have a much more clear error, what we can basically do is link. Okay, if not equals to link, okay, we can type die could not connect to database. Then maybe we can specify the name of our database, which is database, okay, strong. Okay, let's try to put a period, then period again, MySQL connect error. Okay, let's try to adjust my editor. Okay, so if unable to connect, we will be generating this error. So could not connect to database, then this database name, then we have here MySQL connect error. Let's try to see what's the output. Okay, there's no error again, so it means that we have successfully connected to the database. Now, let's just try to proceed a little bit. Let's try to create something which wherein we try to input values on our table. Okay. Okay, so SQL insert into, you have here user. Okay, let's try to check if the name of the database is actually user. So we have here user. We'll be using the table user since we only have one table. User. Have here what's the name? Actually forgot. So we have here admin name. Admin name. Okay. Let's say for example we wanted to change, instead of having it as admin name, we want to change it to username. Okay, how do we do that in phpMyAdmin? In order for us to change, let's say we want to change this one from admin_name to username, all we have to do is just click change. Okay, then try to change to your desired name or to your desired value, new value, then just click save. Okay, so we already have your username and password. Okay, so that's how you would normally do change, or that's how you would normally change in phpMyAdmin. So as you've noticed, it's really quite easy. So let's go back to our code. So username and password. Okay, values. Since you only have two columns, we can just do something like this. Okay. Next thing that we need to do is we need to create this one. Okay, if statement is equals to MySQL prepare, then link. By the way, this link refers to our link identifier here on top. Okay, then we have our SQL insert. Okay. Then so MySQL statement bind param. SS only. Then we have our username and password. Okay, so let me just try to explain this to you. So MySQL statement bind param is actually a way for us to sanitize or to prepare our data that will be inserted on our database. So we're actually going to use it's binding the parameters. Now, what does this SS means? It basically means that we can only insert string onto our user table. Okay, so let's try to add this time the value. Let's say what we can do is, okay, let's try to username administrator, then password, maybe you can put password. Okay, then MySQL statement execute. Okay, then next is we have statement. Okay, now this particular method will actually execute our statement. This is the method that we will be using to insert the values administrator and password into our database. Okay, so let's try this time. Okay, so let's try to check it here first. Else echo unable to prepare query. SQL insert, then link. Okay, let's try to execute this time and try to see if there's an error. If there's an error, we'll just try to make the amends. Okay, it's going to go back to our page and reload the page. Okay, as you've noticed, there's no error whatsoever. Okay, decide to go. This is our going back to our phpMyAdmin. Okay, decide to click browse. Okay, so we already have inserted our new row. So administrator, and we also have our password. Okay, so let's try to do something else. For our password, let's try to hash our password, which means let's just try to encrypt our password. Okay. So how do we do that? So for administrator, let's try to change it maybe to a super user. Okay. Then for password, what we can basically do is maybe we can use MD5. Okay. So can do something like that. Now basically MD5 is a one-way encryption library of PHP. It also same also with SHA-1. Okay. Those both SHA-1 and MD5 are one-way encryption libraries of PHP or method functions of PHP. If we're going to use base64 method, then it's a two-way encryption and decryption. So you can encrypt at the same time also decrypt the value that you would use. Okay, so that's why we have base64 encode and base64 decode. So because it's a two-way, you can actually still see the value that you have previously entered or previously encrypted. Whereas if we're talking about MD5, it's a one-way encryption. So we can no longer decrypt the value that we have previously encrypted. Not unless maybe you're some expert in encryption, then there's a possibility that you can decrypt it. But if you're an ordinary user, so both SHA-1 and MD5 is just a one-way encryption, which is basically just a bunch of gibberish if we're going to look at our database later. Okay, so let's also try to create a prompt here. Echo record, new record has been inserted. Okay, to go back to our page. Okay, so new record has been inserted. Okay, going back to our PHP admin again, let's try to browse. Now notice by the way that we have already our encrypted password. So we have our super user, then we have our encrypted password. So this was our previous value and this is our current value. So as you've noticed, it's no longer the same as what we have previously entered. Although the word is still password, but we can no longer understand the text that has been entered. Okay, so that's how you would encrypt it. Next thing that we need to do is, but if let's say for example we wanted to display the values has been inserted. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, maybe we can do something like SQL select. Okay, so select all from user. Maybe we could put order by ID descending. Then while, so we no longer need to prepare our statement because basically we will just be displaying everything. There's no search for it, just output. While get select is equals to mysqli fetch object. Then we also need our link identifier link. Then SQL select. Okay. Echo get select. Then yeah, specify ID. Then our username. Maybe what we can do is we can also try to use this one, line break. Okay, let's try to see if there's an error in our output. Going back here, okay, MySQLi fetch object expects one parameter to be MySQLi result. Okay, so this is our first error that we have generated. Okay, let's try to troubleshoot our error. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is let's try to create first our query. Query select MySQLi query. Okay, so we have here link for link identifier, then SQL select. For this one, try to change. Maybe we can do something like query select. Okay, so I have to go back here, so I have to reload. Okay, so we already have our values. Okay, so we have our super user, and administrator. So, okay, so I have to add something else. Maybe I can do something and here. Saan? Okay, so we have here 5 rows has been inserted already. So if we were to check our database, quick browse, so we will also have 5 rows. Okay, so as you've noticed, every time we try to click every time we try to reload, a new record is being inserted in our database. Okay, so this is just a quick example on how to connect to a MySQL database using PHP, and at the same time also try to insert and display the values. So this is the code, by the way. Just a little bit of this is actually just a short code, just less than 30 minutes. Just let's test 30 lines, I mean. Sorry. If you find the contents of this blog useful or interesting, don't hesitate to hit the subscribe button. And if you wanted to be notified every time a new video is uploaded, don't forget to hit the bell notification button. Thanks.